Welcome to Free Range Flock. We were once the latchkey kids who came home to an empty house after school. We were feral, resilient, cynical, and innovative. Older than Google. Our teenage faces were never posted on social media. The internet was just an idea in our youth. Now we are older, wiser, and thriving. Our independent ways will continue to serve us. We plan to keep defying the odds, and we will carve our own path. With grace, with humor, with joy. Our way. We've been through some stuff. We will continue to keep pushing, and we are not going anywhere. The former latchkey kids are now the free range flock.
So today we're discussing ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. This is a disorder that we normally associate with kids. So to get ready for this episode, I peeked at the CDC website just to kind of see numbers. And, we normally associate this with kids. And there are 6 million kids between the ages of 3 and 17 who are diagnosed with ADHD.
Wow.
So when we hear about it, we just think it's about kids. But what's interesting is that there's a good number of adults who have ADHD, who go undiagnosed, who just kind of think something's wrong with me, I'm just weird, I'm just different, I'm high maintenance, when actually they probably need to go get tested. So I asked my friend Laura Pipe to come in and talk to us today about getting diagnosed as an adult and what motivated her to do that, and then how it's actually changed her life. As part of the free range flock, you may be thinking, what does this have to do with me, Amy? Why are you talking about this? But some of our flock out there are struggling and dealing with ADHD symptoms for most of their lifetime, and they're just not getting help. They may think, I'm an adult, why should I bother get tested now? And for me, as someone who's watched another adult go through this, I think the big word is clarity. I've seen such an evolution of her from before the test, during the test, and after the test. Like she didn't have to change. I mean, who she is who she is, and nothing's wrong. But she just got clarity about how she functions and what's triggering different things. And she just seems so much more happier now than ever before.
Well, I think it's such a difficult thing to go through life thinking there's something wrong with you.
Right.
And I know several people in my life who probably have ADHD who should have had diagnosis when they were younger, but I think that those tests weren't available a lot of times when we were young. Now I think the symptoms are much more well recognized, and it's so much more accepted to have those tests done and to have that diagnosis. So I think it's super important, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Laura has to say.
So today's guest is Laura Pipe. She's one of my dear friends and an adult who suspected for many years that she had ADHD, but did not get tested. So recently she took the leap and got tested. Not only did this confirm her suspicions, but after working with several professionals, she found a real clarity about who she is and how she works best. I cannot wait for you to hear her story. So let's start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself, introducing yourself to our audience.
So I'm Laura Pipe, and I'm 40 years old. Just got diagnosed with ADHD last October, so almost 8-9 months maybe. Is that where we're at? Grew up here in North Carolina, went to college kind of all over the country, work in higher education. Got 2 dogs, Laverne and Grover, that occupy all my time.
Yay.
And right now I direct a teaching and learning center on a college campus. I'm a kinesiologist by training. Sports sociology actually is my area of expertise. And then my research is actually in skateboarding and BMX and stock car racing and how they interface with public and private space, and also in areas of Native health disparities, as well as Native traditions in sport and health and physical activity. And then within educational research in particular, my research is in decolonial praxis and indigenous pedagogies. So kind of have interests like all over the place that are interconnected in my head, but not in anybody else's, which also is a sign of ADHD, that you have a lot of interest and you follow that dopamine trail. So that's where my research is, yeah.
Fantastic. So what inspired you to get ADHD testing as an adult?
So growing up, like, I had several teachers kind of point out to my mom and dad that they thought I might have ADHD, and my dad just refused to. He was like, no, like, her brain works the way her brain works. She's going to have to figure out how to navigate the world with the brain she has, and so I don't want to put a label on it. I want her to be able to figure out for herself how to navigate in spaces. And he did the same thing. I have a hearing loss. I'm completely deaf in one ear. I have single-sided deafness and slight to moderate deafness in the other ear. And he did the same thing with my deafness too, where he was like, no, she's not getting an IEP. She can function in these spaces really well. She's getting really good grades. Like, that's just not how we're going to roll. And my mom, who is undiagnosed with ADHD and refuses to, because she's like, I'm 65, I don't need it. But ADHD is hereditary, so she definitely, it's very clear since I've been diagnosed, where like everyone's like, yeah, you are. But she knew how to navigate that. So I was really able to mask and pass very easily through school. For a lot of reasons, not just those. Also, an indigenous upbringing with a grandmother who really fed the curiosity, the dopamine needs, of a curious child that I wasn't getting fed in school. And so then, went through college, and in college very early on, my parents got a divorce, and I started going to therapy, and it was very clear that I had just been in this very depressive, anxiety-driven state my whole life. I didn't know that wasn't normal. I thought everybody was twisted up inside like that hard. So did a lot of work on those kind of things throughout, the next, 15, 20 years. But then it got to the point, I think, in the last year and a half where it was like the mechanisms I had used to control, particularly my panic attacks and my anxiety, weren't working. And so I had gotten a new therapist, and she was like, a lot of what you're describing are symptoms of ADHD. And so she's like, I really think you need to get tested on that, because the ADHD diagnosis and the medicines that go along with it oftentimes can really offset the thing. If we don't get to the root of that, it doesn't matter how much panic medicine I give you, you're going to have panic attacks. But if we can get the ADHD under control, then that actually gets to the root of the problem of you're just overstimulated and overwhelmed, and that's what's causing these things. Okay. And I have several friends who were diagnosed in their mid-30s and had said, particularly women are often diagnosed so much later in life, right? We're not diagnosed as kids oftentimes because society has taught us how to mask, right? Mm-hmm. Girls are taught very early on how to read a room and figure out, how do I perform in this room to be as normal and not an inconvenience as possible. Mm-hmm. And so, unlike boys, we go a lot longer before somebody recognizes the problem. And so many women, it happens in adulthood. And all of those friends had said, well, my doctor said, typically with women, it gets noticed when there's a major life change, because your coping mechanisms you've been using no longer work. So you get married, you get a new job, you go through menopause, whatever it is, right? All of a sudden that coping mechanism of how you handle your hormones and everything just changes. And all of a sudden now you're overwhelmed and you can't process in the same way. So that's when a lot of people get diagnosed. And sure enough, a year and a half ago is when we went through a major transition at work, and I got kind of tasked with it. And I think that was kind of the tipping space for me not being able to navigate the way I normally would. So then I went and got tested, and yes, it took about a good month for the medicine to really help quell the panic attacks. But, prior to the diagnosis, I was probably having 3 major panic attacks a week, debilitating ones, where just debilitating. After the diagnosis, I would say right now, I had gotten up to every 2 months having a panic attack, but I could also name very clearly what was triggering it. And then once that started to taper off, then that's when I always joke about how Facebook and Apple like to eavesdrop. So once you say you have ADHD, now you get all the videos and all the stuff and all that kind of stuff, right? They're very, very good at doing that to you. And so now I get all the information, right? And now all out of that comes all of these really, really interesting pieces where I'm like, oh, like I'm not the problem.
Right.
And I think that's what it has been my whole life is I'm the problem. If I can twist myself into a pretzel this way and accommodate this way, then, you know, I don't have to worry about that. My dad's an engineer. He required like black and white, so much structure. And I was the kid that didn't fit that. So I was always like the problem. Mm-hmm. And so that was some of what, like when I went through therapy in college, they were like, so I think really what's happening here is you always think you're wrong. You always think you're in trouble. You always think you're the problem, because my whole life I walked on eggshells. And so if I had had this ADHD diagnosis in college, I think it would have helped me process some of that stuff in a much more healing way versus well, that's trauma. I've just got to put on a shelf and figure out how I'm going to live with it versus, oh, wait, it's because we were missing this key tidbit of information about how my brain might work differently. But for my mom, my brain worked fine. Like for her, she's like, she doesn't have ADHD because we all do those things, which that is always the response that parents give when their kids are diagnosed. And the doctor has to be like, so this is why you probably need to be tested because it looks normal to you.
Right.
Because that's how your brain works. Right. And I mean, and that's the thing too, is it's all normal, right? Like the problem is we live in a society that's structured, that's trying to colonize how we walk and work through life in a very specific way that's built for a very specific person that most of us are not.
Right.
So we're all masking in some way. It's just this is the way I mask.
Right. So I remember being with you, talking with you about the testing. Can you share a bit about what the testing involves? So if someone's thinking about getting tested and is worried about the test, see if we can put them at ease.
So there's a couple of different tests, and the test I did, I think it's called it's like a cue ball test, or it's something with a Q dash and then a B word, but I think it's ball. And I will say, like as an adult, like know this is going to take a lot of lead up time. So don't like call thinking they're going to get you in. It took like 6 months from, you know, and they also are very aware of the people they are working with. So like the paperwork is extensive. They won't even put you on the calendar until you turn all the paperwork in.
Yep.
Like they know who their clientele is. And even like my ADHD doctor, like I get a text message reminder of an appointment a month out from my appointment, the week before my appointment, the day before my appointment, the morning of my appointment, and an hour before the appointment. So I'm like, okay, you know who you're working with. Got you. But it is a long test. So I think it took about 3 hours to do the testing. But, you know, you go in, you do have to pee in a cup every time because you're dealing with controlled substances. Yeah. Well, I don't know if they make kids do it, but they definitely make you do it as an adult. And then they take you in a little room, and the room is, you know, it's got the sound canceling and all this kind of stuff, so it's very kind of quiet. They put a little like strap across your forehead that has a little ball on it. Mm-hmm. And then there's a camera that watches you, right? And so what that camera is doing is it's only measuring the ball. It can't see anything else. And it's literally trying to measure how much you move your head while you're doing this really incredibly boring task. And so my incredibly boring task has been, there's like 4 different shapes, like a blue square, a red square, a blue circle, and a red circle. And they give you this little like buzzer. Makes me think of like when I had my first hearing test in kindergarten, like the little hearing test buzzard. And whenever the same shape appears twice, you have to hit the buzzer.
Okay.
Right? And it's meant to be mind-numbing. Like, so I almost fell asleep multiple times. The first time, second time I may have fallen asleep. And then at the end of that, they come and get you and they show you. And it's actually a chart. So it shows you on this chart where it says, you know, a woman your age with a non-ADHD brain, this is how much she moves, which is like almost nothing. Mm-hmm. And then they show me my brain, and like I'm like, I mean, literally, it's like a Jackson Pollock. My head was like all over this quadrants, and she's like, so I think you're a bouncer. And I'm like, yeah, I do bounce my knees when I'm bored. Mm-hmm. And then also, they also can lay out for you, like, then over the course of like the 35, 40-minute test, how many of those answers you got right, how many you didn't, but it also shows like how quickly you answered. And she's like, I can literally see where you start out and you're focused, then you forgot what you were doing, then you came back, then you forgot again what you were doing, and then you came back, and then at the end you're like, oh crap, I'm just over it. I'm just going to start pushing buttons. And I'm like, oh, and then they overlaid again with a woman my age, similar characteristics, but without ADHD. And she's like, so they have a few errors, but you can see it's like a consistent, like, amount of time all the way through that they take to respond and answer questions and those kind of things. And so that's the physical test of it. But then there's the, like, you have to fill out a questionnaire beforehand. I had to have friends fill out a questionnaire. Amy had to fill it out. About, like, how they perceive how I handle tasks and do tasks, which was really interesting for me because I didn't realize how much I was masking until we did that. There was, like, my best friend Jennifer, who was also, like, my close writing partner, like, you both were like, oh, no, you're good at, like, you don't put off things you don't want to finish, or you don't, you know, after the hard stuff's done, you don't quit working. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, I totally do that. Like, once the fun part's done, I'm done. Right. So like, I'm like, oh, okay. So it also helped me realize, like, oh, how hard I've been trying to, like, compensate and fit into somebody else's model of what productivity looks like, just from that questionnaire.
Right.
And so we talk about the questionnaire. We talk about, like, just my general, what, like, ever since I was a little kid, what were things that were different, or what were things you noticed? How did you organize your desk? You know, that kind of stuff. And so I had told the doctor, I said, well, you know, in third grade, I remember, like, if you finished your assignments, you could play in centers. And I never got to play in centers. So, like, I think I got to play centers twice. So when everybody's like, I have all these great memories of playing Oregon Trail, I got to play Oregon Trail twice, okay? Twice, because I never finished my work. And at the beginning of the year, the center with all the blocks was right in front of me. And so I was constantly, like, trying to chit-chat with the people building blocks about how they were doing it wrong. And so I never finished my work. And so then by, like, middle of the year, the teacher had, like, put all the desks in this giant square, right? So that the big center was open. And so she moved my desk and, like, the one problem kid's desk in there. And I was like, oh, wait. Oh, I was a problem kid. Didn't know that's why I got moved there. I just knew he was a problem kid. And she's like, okay. And, like, that's where I sat for the rest of the year. It was me and this one kid in the middle of the square.
God.
And then she used to make me clean out my desk because I couldn't even fit my books in there. We talked about how, like, my mom used to say, and I still do it. My mom and I joked about it yesterday. My mom tried to teach me not to just answer questions, like to wait 15 seconds so someone else would have a chance. And she did it with, she was like, listen, you're going to get the crap kicked out of you at Sunday school. Like, you need to do this. And the doctor's like, yeah, that's a parent trying to help you navigate the space because she herself understands. But they ask those kind of questions and then start to see a pattern.
Right. How things changed for you once you got tested? Like, once you knew?
I think it was a confidence in my decision-making that changed. I think I'd always second-guessed everything I did. And I'm highly productive. I think most people looking at me would not think, oh, look, she has no confidence in what she does. But I was always second-guessing, like, am I doing all of these things the way they're supposed to be done? Like, if somebody were to lift up the hood, would they be like, oh, my gosh, it's chaos. Like, she's you know. So I was constantly worried about that piece, and I think that shifted a lot for me, where now I'm like, no, like, I'm not the problem here.
Right.
The fact that you think I have to supervise in this way, or you think I have to organize my stuff in this way, or everything needs a spreadsheet, that's the problem, not how my brain holds information or how I process things. So I think it changed my confidence in just how I operate in the world. But it also gave me a name, so when things were happening, I could identify them, right? So when the panic attacks happen, I can be like, oh, this is what's happening. I'm in IKEA on a Saturday on prednisone. That is why I'm having a panic attack right now. Got you, right? But also at the same time, like, I think you and I've talked about this. The one that's come out really recently in some of my conversations with my doctors has been the rejection dysphoria syndrome that I have, that is very much an ADHD. Like that is ADHD often leads to that. And essentially what it is because, again, my brain is taking in all this information that other people don't even realize is happening, and my brain's trying to organize and make sense of it. It reads social cues to the extreme. So, like, you're constantly like, does that person hate me? Is that person mad at me? Oh my gosh, I must be terrible. And that person's like, what? I didn't even wait, huh? I didn't even know there was a problem. And I know you and I've talked about that for years. Like, there's lots of times you've had to be like, no, Laura, you're really okay. Like, you're really good at this. I know, you're fine. But you're constantly having to find self-assurance that people don't hate you for no reason, right? And that to me was like, literally released so much for me. I can at least check it. I can fact check it, right? And so, like, right now, I always like, okay, hold on, I got to stop and go down a little tunnel of logic instead of my little tunnel of emotion, because, emotion is where it sits, right? And the other piece that's really come out of it is realizing, like, my brain is chasing dopamine, which all of our brains are, but the ADHD brain has a deficit. And so everything is about dopamine. So I have to be willing to say, I'm going to follow that. So instead of saying, I have to do these 6 things this morning, I can say, actually, this is what's hitting my little dopamine trigger, so I'm going to finish that, and that's okay. I'm much more willing to cancel a meeting because I'm able to get this thing done right now versus saying, oh, I gotta like stop and transition, and because I won't come back, and I know that. The example I gave somebody this morning was about, like, I've always said I hate to read. I'm like, I hate to read. I hate reading. Amy will tell you. Like, I hate it. And it's not that I hate reading. I can't read fiction. Fiction does not entertain me. Some people with ADHD, fiction is the dopamine rush they need. Okay. For me, it is not. It has to have a utilitarian purpose. Like, it has to be knowledge for an endpoint for me to do it. I never know what's going to be the book that is going to hit the dopamine rush, right? So that knowing that that's where I'm at is been really powerful.
What other symptoms might adults look for that they might want to get tested?
Yeah. So, I mean, anxiety for me was the big trigger, and I think that is true for a lot of women. It's all you can, that overwhelmedness all the time is part of it. A lot of times doctors will say, like, well, think about how messy your house is. Like, do you live like in piles? Which, I mean, I do. I think a lot of ADHD, I have a pile for all my important papers. I don't know what important papers are there. And I might forget to actually go back to those important papers, but that's what that pile is for. It's things that I don't know what to do with, but I'm not ready to throw away, right? The ADHD refrigerator is often either packed full of food or completely empty. Like, there's like the living in those kind of extremes, all or nothing. The one that really got me where I was like, crap, I do that, is she's like, when you start a new hobby, do you buy all the stuff? And I'm like, I do buy all I was like, I'm going to do stained glass. I'm doing it. I got all the stuff. Okay, we're talking hundreds of dollars of stuff. I tried it for an hour and was like, this is boring as hell. And now I have all this stuff. That is ADHD in a nutshell. Okay. And it's like, I'm going to buy all of these books because the book titles looks really cool. I totally want the information that's in the book. I have a bookshelf. Amy will show you. Yeah. I got a brand new bookshelf. It is like, it's one of those big IKEA, like 7x8 bookshelves kind of thing.
It's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. Full of books that I've never read. But I want to own the book. Yeah. I want the knowledge that's in the book. Yes. I want it, but I just can't do it. Like, those are the ADHD pieces. But then also, like, there's certain things that I know are, like, for all the chaos that lives in my brain, that I know are also, like, the structures I have to have in place. So Amy will tell you, tablecloths for me, I know it's sad. Amy will tell you,
there's a tablecloth on our table, by the way. I just want to say, just for you.
Like, so when we have events and programs for faculty, like, you have to have a tablecloth. Like, it's about presentation, but the tablecloth gets folded a certain way so it doesn't wrinkle. Like, that is an ADHD like coping mechanism because I can't control anything else. This is the one
This is
thing
the one
I
thing you
can.
Totally get it.
So, which, I mean, it's like a total nonsense thing. Like, I can iron a tablecloth, but then it's like, no, I gotta, like, and so there's little things like that happen. Talking too much. So I'm sure when you guys go to edit this, that's gonna be so fun. Like, you just can't control yourself. Cutting other people off in conversations out of excitement, right? It's not intentional, like, but it's out of excitement. Matching stories, I think, is the other thing. So, like, out of it. So, when somebody tells you about an experience, you're so excited that you have an experience that mirrors it, you can't wait to tell them. And the other person is like, but this was about me. And you're like, no, it still is. But I'm just so excited to tell you, we both had the same story. And so that's an ADHD problem. Like, you can't always regulate some of those pieces. But then once you label it, then you're starting to be like, oh, well, what that actually means is, as long as I know that's what's going to happen, I can either game the system a little bit in my brain, or I know, like, this is due this day, so I'm not going to put anything on my calendar that day. But I can do other stuff ahead of that, right? Or if I know that I want to jump in and be like, oh, my gosh, I got this great story. Now I know I'm like, pause for a moment. Wait for a second for them to take a breath. And then you can say, maybe add your, so then you're not, like, you start to realize those pieces are there. The other thing that for me was a huge indicator that I didn't even realize was how excitable I get about new ideas. Like, Amy will tell you, I'll come into her office and be like, Amy, I don't care what you're working on. I got to tell you, I got this really great idea.
I know you're in a meeting, but get out.
Like, right now. I got to tell you right this minute. And she's like, oh, okay. And then after I get it out, I'm like, all right, I'm good. And then she's like, so what are we going to do with it? I don't know. I just had to get it out. I was just so excited. I bought, like, I bought this portable pop-up stand so we can go do these cool things. And Amy's like, oh, okay. Was it important right this minute? Yes. It was very important right this minute that I tell you, because I was so excited. And it's just, ADHD, it's that, again, it's all or nothing.
Right.
Your brain works in extremes. So,
Yeah.
So to leave us today of some guidance. So think about someone's listening to this, they're in their 50s and 60s and thinking, I'm not going to get tested. There's no point in getting tested. What would you tell that person? They're sitting right here.
It's the same thing I've been telling my mom, right? My mom's, she's 65. She's like, I got 2 more years of retirement. She's like, she works in a preschool. So she's like, so it works really well. Preschoolers love the ADHD brain. They really do. And that's true. Like, the ADHD brain gets preschoolers. And Amy and I've talked about this before. Like, the people that relate to me the most are the under the age of 12. Like, they're my mini-me's. And it's because, like, they're as excited as you are. Like, do not underestimate how excited a 9-year-old telling you about their 3rd favorite reptile really is. It's super exciting. But, like, what I keep telling my mom is, like, but don't you want to know how your brain works?
Yeah.
Because if you know, then it's power, right? And nobody can then take that power from you. Because I've spent so much of my life being minimized by other people telling me I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I can't fit these things, and I'm trying to twist myself into knots for those people, that the minute I found out that that's not actually what's happening in my brain, then I can live life differently, more fulfilling. But then also things like people with ADHD, we often have trouble with finances, let's be honest. Because you like that instant dopamine hit, you don't always think about the consequences of those. Okay, in retirement, you need to really worry about that. There's a finite amount of money, so you either need to get you an Amy Brown or, like, an accountability partner. But, like, those things are really real things, right? And then also, like, as you're coming up on retirement, the hope is that's going to be time for you.
Right.
Why would, like, knowing how you enjoy and love to spend time, like, that's to me going to be the most fulfilling piece of this. Because, for years I always had therapists say, well, I need you to meditate. Okay, I can't meditate. Like, that's, my ADHD brain doesn't work that way. Some do. I fall asleep, so that doesn't help me. Or they'll say, well, you need to get a hobby. Like, name for me 2 hobbies that you do just for you. And I'm like, now I'm going to have panic attacks. I have to think of a hobby that I don't have, right?
Right.
Versus now I can say, I got lots of little projects I like to work on, and that to me is a hobby, right? I love being outside in my yard and gardening, and that's sufficient. Like, I shouldn't have to be like, I do book clubs and I do this and I do that. But like, society has told us all of those things are how, as we age, and once we get time to ourselves, that's how we're supposed to fill it.
Right.
Versus now I can say, no, that's not how I fill my time.
Exactly.
I fill my time with things that feed what I need them to feed. It just gives you a confidence to live your life on your terms, unscripted and unapologetically. And that's my goal. I want to get to a place where I can be unapologetic for who I am and who I want to be. And that I think is probably, Amy, going back to that question of what have I seen as the difference, you're right, that may be it. That may be the place. I'm getting much better addressing conflict. I'm getting much better at naming what my needs are. I'm getting much better at saying, you know what, this is not worth my time and energy. I'm putting in more effort than somebody else has to do something that's doesn't feel good, doesn't feel right, and doesn't make sense. I'm going to stop doing that now.
It's been lovely to watch, to see her evolve this way. So thank you so much for coming in
thanks
today
for
and
having
talking
us.
to us. Lots of great information. Thank you.
It was wonderful. Thank you. It was lovely to meet you.
You too.
Sarah, what did you think about Laura's story?
Oh my gosh. It resonated with me so much. First, just hearing her story and how hard it must have been for her to live in a household where she was validated by her mother, but her father didn't validate the way that she processed things. I mean, that must have been incredibly difficult. But it also resonated with me because I saw myself in a lot of the things that she was talking about.
Okay.
So, yeah, that was really, really powerful. But there were so many different things that she did talk about that, I don't know, I think were incredibly powerful and will be helpful for our listeners as well.
Right. And I get a front row seat to Laura because I work with Laura, and I've seen people higher up treat her a certain way, and it makes her she's a brilliant woman. She can solve things at a, she can be doing 5 different things and solving 5 different problems at the same time. It's amazing, and how she can kind of see things from the horizon coming at us. But she really kind of doubted her own abilities, and like, I think something's wrong with me. I think I'm, something's off and weird, but that's just me. And and seeing her take that test and get such clarity, and then like she now like, well, she has clear boundaries now, and she has clear strategies now, and she's like, when she gets overwhelmed, she knows what to do. Mm-hmm. It's just, I was telling you, that's a different friend that's sitting here in this chair was, when I saw her before October, and now it's just amazing to see that transformation. So knowing that there might be people out there who are having those symptoms and thinking, wow, maybe I'm just always off and I'm always an outsider. No, it's time to talk to your doctor and see, what can I do? The goal is not to change. I mean, who you are is who you are. But if you know how your brain works, and you know what you need, and you know, like, when I do these things and they overwhelm me, why they overwhelm you, then you can change the script. You can flip it.
Exactly. I mean, having that diagnosis can make all the difference in the world. It allows you to own it, to realize what's going on in your brain. People think there's something wrong with you, but it's just the way your brain is wired.
Right.
And knowing that allows you to celebrate that in yourself.
And I've known some ADHD people in my life, besides Laura, and they're brilliant. They're just their minds are just fascinating, but they beat themselves up because they just think that I'm not following the norms that are out there, the standards, or how everyone else is doing it, and that's just not the case. It's
really hard to have that constant stream of like, there's something wrong with you. Why are you so emotional, or why are you so analytical, or whatever it is, because everyone with ADHD exhibits a little bit differently. But it's just, like I say, it's that knowing that it's just
Yeah.
the way you are and accepting that as
Right.
being beautiful. But one of the things she said that really stood out to me too was the fact that she had that superpower of being
Yeah.
to observe and be able to nail it immediately after observing it.
Right.
You know, having that tunnel of logic, that tunnel of emotion, and being able to use those together to analyze situations. And so, again, flip the script.
Yeah.
And here, she's got superpowers.
Yeah, she definitely has superpowers. So if you're out there and you suspect that you've had ADHD in any way or something, like that, and you haven't done anything about it, now's the time.
Yeah.
Even though you're a Gen Xer and you are in your 50s and 60s, it's not too late. You need to do that for your own clarity and your own peace of mind.
Definitely. And we will put some resources in the show notes.
In the show notes.
So just keep an eye out and click through. And if you think it's you, take the leap.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us for Free Range Flock. Our goal is to inspire and celebrate who we are, the Generation X kids who grew up and decided to do things their way, with grace, humor, and joy. This has been a production of Sassy Am. If you want to learn more about our podcast, follow our blog, share your positive insights about being a free ranger, or to suggest topics or guests for future episodes, please visit our website at sassayam.com. That's SASSAYAM.com. Keep pushing.